The girl received a pregnancy test for the first time and didn't even know how to use it. Another imprisoned girl whispered a reminder to her. At that moment, she thought it was a rare act of kindness in the darkness. But the very next day, the girl who taught her how to use the pregnancy test was taken away and vanished. This was because she had been tested and found to be pregnant. Only later did the girl learn that even if a child was born here, they would be sold off. In this place, for a woman, pregnancy is not a sign of hope, but a sentence. The year is 1994 in New Mexico, USA. The protagonist of the story, Hyunjae, is an 18-year-old Korean-American girl at the most carefree stage of her life. With her final exams approaching, she just received a graduation ring as a gift from her father. Besides her studies, Hyunjae usually helps out at the store her father owns. On this particular day, she tells her mother that she can close the shop tonight since a friend will give her a ride home. Her mother agrees, requesting that Hyunjae be home by 10 in the evening. What her mother doesn't know is that Hyunjae had already secured a fake ID through a friend. That night, she and her friend head to a bar together. As night falls, the city's neon lights flicker on the streets, while the air is thick with a mix of alcohol, music, and the relaxed excitement unique to young people. People come and go outside the bar as music spills through the cracks of the door, with laughter and conversation intertwined. They are dressed casually and look relaxed, their faces carrying a trust in life that hasn't yet been worn down, making everything seem no different from any other ordinary night of youth. Here, she encounters a well-dressed and well-spoken young man. He is wearing a firefighter's uniform and offers to buy the girls drinks. During their conversation, his tone is natural, and he makes no offensive gestures. The man's image is extremely deceptive, as his gentle attitude and slow, steady speech make him seem like a trustworthy, ordinary good guy. In that era, people naturally associated the profession of a firefighter with safety and justice. He remains very patient, neither forcing himself upon her nor showing excessive enthusiasm. As the night grows late, he quite naturally offers to give her a ride. Hyunjae is not drunk, and she knows exactly what she is doing. Her choice isn't impulsive, but rather a judgment based on the current environment, his identity, and her own experience. Once the car starts, the initial journey is perfectly normal, as the lights outside the window recede and the streets gradually become empty. At this moment, the danger doesn't appear in a violent form, but instead approaches slowly under the guise of kindness, resembling a romantic encounter for a young person. He speaks of how much he admires her, and they share a hug and a kiss. Shortly after, the man claiming to be a firefighter steps out of the car to make a phone call. Hyunjae quickly discovers that this person isn't a firefighter at all, as those badges were nothing more than carefully prepared props, which causes her to start feeling uneasy. Just as she raises her guard and prepares to open the door to get out, the situation takes a sudden turn, as darkness instantly swallows her vision. The man opens the trunk of the car where Hyunjae is now curled up inside. She is struck by panic and tries to struggle and cry out for help, but the space inside the car is so narrow that her resistance has almost no effect. The man simply tells her, "It won't be long," before slamming the trunk shut. The moment the trunk lid closes, the sounds of the outside world are completely cut off, leaving only the vibration of the engine and the sound of her own rapid breathing. Hyunjae is then transferred to a truck for transport. She soon realizes she isn't the only victim, as there are other girls just like her, shivering in a corner of the truck bed. The vehicle travels for what feels like a very long time, with no one telling her where they are going or offering any explanation. Time loses all meaning in the darkness, and fear is gradually replaced by a deeper sense of despair. When she is finally pulled out again, there are no windows, and she can't distinguish between day and night, as the air is filled with the cold scent of disinfectant, sweat, and metal. She is pushed into a cramped room. The room has no decorations, containing only a bed, a piercingly bright light, and a guard standing in the corner, watching coldly. She is handcuffed to a hospital bed. A woman who looks like a doctor walks toward her with a completely expressionless face. Her cries for help are utterly useless. The guarding man holds her down while the woman injects her with a sedative, after which she roughly removes her braces and cleans her wounds. This so-called examination isn't out of concern, but is rather like inspecting cargo to confirm the condition of the goods. The entire process is cold and mechanical, without a single word of unnecessary communication. Her resistance, cries, and humiliation hold no meaning here. Soon, she is fitted with a shackle containing a tracking device and settled into a dormitory. At that moment, she realizes for the first time that she is no longer a free person. The shackle is not just a tool to limit movement, but also a psychological suggestion that any boundary crossed will be immediately detected. The first step of imprisonment isn't violence, but the deprivation of identity. Hyun-jae likely doesn't know that she is already located in a desolate area on the outskirts of Las Vegas. This is a large warehouse that looks ordinary on the outside, but has been completely remodeled on the inside. A mature operating system has already been established here. Some people are responsible for guarding, some for making arrangements, and some coldly record information as if she were just an item being received. Here, she meets Bob, one of the controllers of this place, who is a refined-looking but corrupt law enforcement official. Earlier, he had cold-bloodedly shot and unalived 2 people, including a deputy sheriff and a landowner, simply because they discovered the body of a girl wearing a shackle. He has a calm exterior and speaks without haste, even maintaining a deliberately crafted sense of rationality and care. This surface calmness is bone-chilling, as Bob doesn't need hysterical threats. He only needs to sit there and explain reality in a tone accustomed to manipulating the fates of others. In his eyes, this isn't a crime scene but a business, and she is just a newly received resource. Bob announces in front of her that her original name no longer matters, as from this moment on, she is renamed Eden. The name sounds gentle and ironic, as if suggesting this place is a paradise, when in reality it symbolizes total corruption and loss. The change of name isn't a formality, but a complete severance that cuts all ties to her past life. Next comes the most fatal step, threatening her family. Bob tells her that they already have all her family's information, including their home address, relationships, and even their daily routines. He doesn't show the evidence on the spot, but simply tells her in an extremely calm voice that if she doesn't cooperate, the consequences won't fall on her alone. These words are like a dull knife, slowly but precisely cutting away her last shred of desire to resist. Hyun-jae truly realizes that she has lost the possibility of returning to her original world. Furthermore, she is forced to understand one thing. Resistance is no longer just about herself. In this place, her name, identity, and past life are all erased. No one calls her Hyun-jae anymore, and she no longer belongs to herself. This place isn't a temporary detention center, but a transit station specifically used for human trafficking and illegal transactions. From an ordinary girl, she has instantly fallen into a completely alien world from which there is no escape. Subsequently, the true rules begin to be instilled, and the forced work starts shortly after. There is a clear division of labor here, with some responsible for management, some for guarding, some for transporting guests, and others for filming video materials. The entire system operates in an orderly, cold, and efficient manner. When Eden is pushed into this system, there is no buffer period or opportunity to adapt. Every day is strictly scheduled, from when to wake up and when to be inspected, to when she is taken away and when she returns. She loses the concept of time and any ability to judge the future. Before the physical trauma has even healed, new humiliations follow one after another, and she begins to show obvious signs of psychological collapse, fear, numbness, denial, and breakdown alternating repeatedly in a short time. Eden was not without her attempts to escape. In the early days of her imprisonment, she still held on to a primal instinct for freedom. She tried to observe the guards' patrol patterns and looked for flaws in the security system. However, every one of her attempts was anticipated and met with a nearly programmed punishment. She was locked in an isolation room without water, light, or anyone to speak to, where she was forced to stay awake. No one cursed at her or beat her. There was only ice-cold water and the sound of silent waiting. This punishment was not meant to vent violence, but to achieve domestication and make her understand the true cost of resistance. She slowly realized that this place did not need continuous violence to maintain order. True control came from fear, exhaustion, and the systematic destruction of hope. Gradually, she learned to be silent and to stop looking people in the eye. She learned to suppress her reactions, even when her emotions were on the verge of a total breakdown. Her psychological defenses did not collapse in an instant, but were eroded bit by bit through constant repetition. She did not yield to violence, but was instead trapped in a system of rules with no exit. There were no choices here, only obedience or more brutal consequences. In the early stages, Eden understood a law of survival. As long as you kept your sense of self, this place would constantly remind you that it had the power to destroy you. And this was the true beginning of her descent into the dark Eden. For Eden, the initial tearing fear was slowly replaced by a more dangerous emotion, numbness. She realized that escaping based on pure impulse and instinct was almost impossible. This was not a temporary hideout, but a long-term operating system. Every door, every guard, and every passage existed solely to prevent accidents. Her many failures had already proven that this place was far better prepared than she imagined. The thing that truly changed her mindset was not a specific punishment, but witnessing the fates of others. She was not alone. There were many other women lured or kidnapped just like her. They came from different backgrounds but shared the same dire situation. They rarely spoke because fear was everywhere, but the consensus in their eyes was unspoken. Everyone understood that any overly close behavior could bring nothing but trouble. Among these people, Priscilla's presence was especially important to Eden. They were not longtime friends, but they built a fragile yet real reliance in their shared captivity. One day, Priscilla was shocked to find that Eden was already nearly 19 years old. She whispered that terrible things happened to girls who were considered too old in this place. Soon after, Priscilla was taken away alone and mysteriously vanished. At first, everyone thought it was just a normal arrangement, but Eden soon learned the real reason. Priscilla was pregnant. In this place, pregnancy did not mean protection, but rather a deeper risk. Priscilla was isolated from the group, and no one knew where she was taken or what she would face. Priscilla's disappearance made Eden truly think for the first time. She realized that if she continued to endure passively, her ending would only slide towards something worse. From then on, she began to change her way of survival. This change was not a sudden rebellion or a heroic awakening. It was a hidden, almost self-betraying adjustment. She began to deliberately observe everything around her. She noted who kept the records, who was the contact, who held the keys, and who let their guard down. She discovered that while the system was cruel, it was not completely chaotic. It relied on people to run and on a certain level of trust to function. Eden noticed that Vaughn's trustee, Svetlana, was wearing the graduation ring her father gave her. Eden lunged forward in a rage to grab the ring but was pulled away by Vaughn and his thugs. They forced her to swallow the ring. Her throat burned with a stinging pain, but she did not collapse. Instead, she calmed down and proactively offered to help Vaughn manage his accounts. Vaughn was suspicious at first, but seeing how smart she was, he eventually agreed. At a party, Eden helped collect payments, which showed Vaughn her extra value. So Eden began to be assigned to handle trivial tasks like answering phones and organizing accounts. At first, this was a temporary arrangement, but she realized these tasks gave her a weak but real sense of security. She was no longer always locked in the same space and didn't have to face unknown violence at any moment. She began to do things better on purpose, not to please them, but to lower the risk of being discarded. Slowly, she was allowed to access more internal matters, including personnel arrangements and simple coordination. She gradually replaced Svetlana as Vaughn's right hand and no longer had to see clients. She saw the other side of the system, cold but highly structured. She also realized that the ones in control were not just the visible abusers. They were the ones sitting behind the scenes, calmly calculating the profits. This upward move did not bring her dignity or true freedom. Instead, it put Eden in an even more complex psychological dilemma. She realized her position was changing, and this change could easily be misunderstood as siding with the abusers. Eden's heart was torn with contradiction. She hated this place, but had to fake obedience to find a sliver of hope for life. She had no choice. Surviving here required paying a price. If she did not fight for a safer position, she could be taken away like Priscilla at any time. So she secured a small foothold for herself in the darkness. It was not for comfort, but to wait for an opportunity that had not yet appeared. After adapting to internal survival, she found this stable system was not as solid as it seemed. It began to show cracks that had been hidden for a long time. The order was not indestructible, but was a temporary balance built on fear and profit. Once the distribution of profit shifted, the violence would rapidly spiral out of control. This change first appeared in Bob. As the mastermind, he had always presented a calm and rational image to the world. He rarely did the dirty work himself, preferring to use rules and threats to maintain order. But as time passed, he began to show an unstable side. While handling internal affairs, Eden noticed anomalies in the fund flows and more brutal problem-solving. The system was no longer just about control. It was beginning to clean house. Certain people were taken away and never returned without any explanation. To others, this was a warning, but to Eden, it was a signal of danger. When a system starts frequently using extreme measures, it often means it is heading for collapse. At this time, Bob's crimes also began to be exposed. He was questioned by a detective at a seminar because GPS showed him at the last known location of a missing deputy. The real turning point was when the conflict between Bob and his deputy Vaughn became public. Vaughn was the core of the execution level and was more directly involved in the violence. For a long time, he had been dissatisfied with Bob's control and decision-making. As Bob's risks grew, this dissatisfaction turned into open hostility. One day, Eden and Vaughn went to see Bob to dispose of bodies, including Svetlana's. They threw the bodies into a nearby lake. On the boat, Bob began to lecture Vaughn once again. Suddenly, Vaughn betrayed Bob and brutally unalived him on the boat. This was not a righteous act of rebellion, but a naked liquidation of power. Eden's heart raced because she knew the gang was now in chaos. This might be her only chance. One day, while Eden is answering the phone, a customer's way of asking about prices sets off alarm bells in her head. It is a clear signal of a police sting operation, but she deliberately takes the order without saying a word. Eden and Vaughn then take a girl to meet Mario, the very man who had once stuffed her into that car trunk. While heading to the restroom, Eden discovers a room filled with cribs and finds Priscilla in the late stages of her pregnancy. Priscilla naively believes her baby will live with her, having no idea that this place is a den for their illegal business. Eden's heart is wrenched with pain, yet she forces back her tears and pretends as if nothing is wrong. On the way back, Vaughn senses something is off and forces her to prove her loyalty by unaliving a girl in the desert. Eden's hands tremble as she holds the gun with tear-filled eyes, only for Vaughn to call it off at the final moment. Perhaps because of the trap Eden deliberately set earlier, one of the gang's thugs has turned state's evidence. Realizing that the situation is spiraling out of control, Vaughn decides to relocate the base. He then takes Eden to his home, telling her that they are moving to Dubai. Eden knows this is her absolute last chance. So while Vaughn is in the restroom, she sprays chemicals onto his injection tube. After inhaling the substance, Vaughn collapses to the ground in agony and is unalived. Trembling, Eden cuts off her ankle monitor, grabs the illicit goods and the cash, and heads straight for Mario's house. This man has always hovered on the fringes of the system, handling the luring, transport, and handovers as the filthiest yet most overlooked link in the network. That house is the starting point and the ending point that Eden must face. She has no weapons, no backup, and no supposed plan B. All she can rely on is everything she learned within the system, her calmness, her observation, and her judgment of human nature. She knows Mario's habits well, knowing he is greedy and underestimates his enemies, and that his perception of her as submissive is a fatal error. Eden chooses to exploit this by entering Mario's sight in an eerily calm state, showing no violent resistance or loss of emotional control. She attempts to negotiate, offering money in exchange for Priscilla's freedom. Mario refuses, though he admits he remembers her. Her almost abnormal composure causes Mario to lower his guard completely. Just as Mario's defenses are down, Eden uses the compounds to make him lose consciousness rapidly. There are no wasted movements or hesitations in the process, as she knows that a single moment of doubt means certain death. She then finds Priscilla and delivers the crushing news that the baby has already been sold. At that moment, Eden has no time for explanations. She simply takes Priscilla's hand and tells her they are leaving right now. They finally step out of that house. The night is deep and the roads are empty, leaving them with no directions and no certainty if they are still within range of surveillance. Eden doesn't dare to stop and continues driving until she spots a public payphone. It is an incredibly ordinary payphone, yet it becomes the most significant symbol in the entire film. Eden stands before the payphone with her hands shaking. It has been far too long since she spoke as Hyun-jae, and she isn't even sure if her voice will be recognized. At the moment of dialing, her hand pauses for a long time, as if pressing the final digit will cause everything to come crashing down. Once the call goes through, she finally hears her mother's voice. With no background music and no emotional outburst, Eden simply calls out in a low, whispered voice. Upon hearing her mother's voice on the other end, she is no longer Eden, the numbered, recorded, and traded object. She is once again a person with a home and someone who cares for her. The response from the other end isn't fully shown, only the sound of a mother constantly calling out the name Hyun-jae. But the audience knows clearly that this isn't an ending, but a beginning of reconnecting with the world. The film doesn't show the subsequent trial, the liquidation, or the descent of justice. This is because the movie was never about whether the villains were punished, but about how a person regains their will to walk back into the human world after being stripped of everything. Hyun-jae didn't conquer hell, she simply walked out of it alive. And that, in itself, is the most brutal and honest victory. The movie Eden is adapted from a true story, reflecting the harsh realities of illegal transactions and human trafficking in modern society. Even within the confines of law and civilized society, structural corruption and the exploitation of the vulnerable can still exist. This isn't a feel-good movie, but one that leaves the audience in a long, contemplative silence. Hyun-jae's journey from an innocent girl to a forced victim, and finally, to a woman reclaiming her freedom through her wit, is heartbreaking, yet resonant. It tells us that there really are lives being bought and sold in this world, along with cries for help that are silenced forever. While invisible shadows of darkness lurk in life, it also teaches us that as long as one doesn't give up on themselves, no cage is absolute. Inner strength and the instinct to survive can tear through any shackle. Some places are called Eden, but grow only wounds instead of flowers. Some places are named heaven, but are actually the abyss. Cherishing freedom and staying alert to the dangers around us is the true message the film wants to convey. While the evil in human nature is terrifying, courage remains eternal. And no matter how desperate things seem, one must seize that sliver of hope to crawl out. True light isn't about forgetting the darkness, but seeing it clearly, and then fleeing without ever looking back. And true freedom never comes from being saved, but from the moment you decide to stop bowing your head.